So, a brand new document just dropped in Turkey, and wow, it's shedding some serious light on one of the world's most complicated and long running conflicts. We've got our hands on the transcript, so let's dive right in and see what it's all about.
The whole thing really boils down to this one huge question. What in the world was said in this top secret meeting between Turkish lawmakers and the imprisoned PKK leader Abdullah Öcalan? Well, we don't have to wonder anymore. The answers are out, and trust me, they're pretty eye-opening. Okay, so let's set the scene. The meeting went down on November 24th, 2025 on the prison island of Imralı. And what we have now is the official 16-page transcript, the Imralı High Security Prison meeting record that lays out the entire conversation. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's just do a quick refresher on the key players.
Right, so first up, Abdullah Öcalan. Who is he? Well, he's the founder of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK. Now, he's been in prison since 1999, but make no mistake, he's still a massively influential figure in this conflict that's been going on for decades between the PKK and the Turkish state.
All right, so let's talk about who was actually in the room for this super high-stakes meeting, and what were they even doing there? Yeah, this was no casual coffee chat. This visit was the real deal, an official part of a parliamentary commission. Its very formal-sounding name was the Commission for National Solidarity, Brotherhood, and Democracy. And its mission, set up a few months before this meeting, was basically to figure out how to end the violence peacefully, legally, and democratically. And this is where it gets really interesting. Look at who they sent. This wasn't just one party. It was a mix from across the political spectrum. You've got Hüseyin Yaman from the ruling party, the AKP, and he's there voicing the concerns of soldiers' families. Then there's Fethi Yildiz from the nationalist MHP, whose position is pretty clear. Democracy can only happen if the terror ends. And then you have Gülistan Kılıç from the pro-Kurdish Dem Party, who's basically trying to ask, okay, how do we actually make any of this happen? I mean, just imagine the dynamic with those three very different viewpoints all in the same room.
Okay, so that's the setup. Now let's get to the main event. What did Öcalan actually have to say? What was his message from that prison cell?
Right off the bat, he frames this whole thing in huge historical terms. This isn't just about politics today, he says. He calls it a 1,000-year problem. And get this, he argues that if they succeed, it won't just shape the next 100 years, but the next 1,000. So in his mind, the stakes are, well, they're astronomical. And this right here is a really critical part of his message. He says, look, he wanted to end the actual fighting way back in 1993. But, and this is a big but, he makes this really important distinction. It's not enough to just put down the guns, the physical arms. He says everyone has to abandon their mental weapons, too. The mindsets, the hate, the ideologies that keep the conflict going. For him, real peace can't happen without a total psychological shift from everybody involved.
And then comes this moment that probably made everyone in the room do a double take. Öcalan, the founder of the PKK, starts praising Devlet Bahçeli. I mean, this is the leader of the nationalist MHP, one of his fiercest political opponents, and Öcalan calls his involvement a rare act of political courage. He's basically saying that this very strange, unlikely partnership is the key to the whole thing.
And he's not just speaking in grand philosophical terms. He gets really practical. He ties his ability to actually deliver on any of his promises to this Turkish legal idea called umut hakkı, which translates to the hope right. What's he really saying? He's saying, hey, if you want me to convince my followers to go for peace, you have to change my prison conditions. I need to be able to communicate. It's a very clear quid pro quo.
But, as the conversation goes on, it becomes clear there's a giant elephant in the room, and that elephant is Syria. You simply cannot talk about peace in Turkey without talking about the war happening right next door. The two are completely intertwined.
And the lawmakers did not hold back. They really pressed him on this. They're asking, are your fighters just moving from Iraq over to Syria instead of actually disarming? Are you just playing a shell game with us? And the biggest question of all, when you talk about ending the violence, does that mean all of your groups everywhere, especially the ones in Syria? I mean, these are tough, pointed questions. And to get why they were pushing so hard, you have to look at the calendar. There was a major crisis brewing in Syria at that exact moment. The Kurdish-led SDF was losing ground and fast. On top of that, a new political deal had just been signed in January that was all about integrating the SDF into the Syrian state. And here's the kicker.
The delegation mentioned a hard deadline of March 10th for this plan. So yeah, the clock was absolutely ticking.
So what did Öcalan say to all this? Well, according to the transcript, his response was pretty much exactly what Ankara wanted to hear. He was very clear. He says he is not pushing for a separate Kurdish state, not even a federal system. Instead, he says he supports a unified Syria, but, and this is his key point, with strong local democracy.
And then he drops this bombshell. It's maybe his most direct claim of power in the whole transcript. They're talking about Mazlum Abdi, the top commander of the STF in Syria. And Öcalan just says, flat out, Mazlum Abdi is loyal. That's it. It's a crystal clear message. I still run things. I can control the key military guys on the ground. I can be the solution.
Okay, so let's pull the camera back a bit. We've gone through the details, but what does this all mean for the bigger geopolitical picture? What are the stakes here for the whole region? Well, Öcalan lays out this vision of a massive regional chessboard. He gives this stark warning. If this peace process fails, a vacuum will be created, and other powers are just waiting to jump in and exploit the chaos. He even names names. He points to Israel and Iran, saying they have their own projects in the works. The implication is clear. A deal between Turks and Kurds is the only way to block these other powers.
So, what's his alternative? He calls it democratic integration. And the idea is pretty ambitious. He's saying if we can figure out a peace model that works in Turkey, it won't just stop there. It could be like a blueprint, a template that could be used to bring stability to Syria, Iraq, and maybe even Iran.
So when you boil it all down, what this single transcript really shows us is that this is so much bigger than just one country's internal problem now. We're looking at a super delicate, incredibly high-stakes negotiation where Turkey's domestic conflict is completely 100% tied up with a war in another country. You can't solve one without solving the other. They're totally inseparable.
And so that leaves us with the big, hanging question, right? Is this transcript the first page in a brand new chapter, a real path to peace, or is it just the minutes of a meeting, the official record of a massive political gamble with a future that is, for the entire region, dangerously uncertain?